Welcome to our deep dive into the dark side of money. Today, we'll uncover how financial systems, institutions, and behaviors can contribute to widespread societal harm. A hammer can build a house or bash in a skull, but the difference lies in who's wielding it and their intentions. And let's be clear, the world of finance, well, it's got more than its fair share of skull bashers. We're talking about systems that prioritize profit over people, institutions that prioritize short-term gains over long-term sustainability, and behaviors driven by an insatiable hunger for more. We'll expose the greed, the corruption, and the exploitation that often hide in plain sight. Buckle up, kids, it's going to be a bumpy ride. Our first stop on this delightful journey takes us straight to the heart of corporate and political corruption. We're talking about the kind of greed that would make Gordon Gekko blush. CEOs raiding pension funds, politicians lining their pockets with bribes, companies exploiting workers in developing countries. The worst part? These acts of financial malfeasance rarely happen in a vacuum. They create ripple effects, spreading outwards and impacting the lives of countless individuals. When corporations prioritize profits over people, it's the average worker who gets squeezed. When politicians are bought and paid for by special interests, it's the average citizen who loses their voice. This isn't just about a few bad apples, though. It's about a system that often incentivizes and rewards this kind of behavior. Let's talk about economic inequality. The gap between the haves and the have-nots is a chasm. A tiny percentage controls most of the wealth, while millions struggle. The system is rigged. Stagnant wages, rising healthcare costs, and a tax code favoring the wealthy. Economic inequality harms everyone. It stifles growth and creates unrest. Remember the French Revolution? It wasn't about baguettes. We need to address this head-on. Now let's shift gears and talk about something near and dear to my heart, the environment. Because as it turns out, the relentless pursuit of profit isn't just bad for people, it's also terrible for the planet. When corporations prioritize short-term profits over long-term sustainability, the environment often takes a back seat. Why invest in renewable energy when you can burn cheap coal? Why develop sustainable practices when you can dump your waste in the nearest river? We're facing an environmental crisis of unprecedented proportions, and the financial sector bears a significant responsibility. The pursuit of profit is literally costing us the earth. Let's talk about the psychological impact of our obsession with money. Chasing bigger paychecks often takes a toll on our mental health. We work longer hours and sacrifice our personal lives. Burnout, anxiety, and depression are common in our workaholic culture. Advertising tells us we need more to be happy, but materialism is a bottomless pit. This pursuit leaves us feeling empty and disconnected. We end up constantly chasing the next dopamine hit. Speaking of things that truly matter, let's talk about the erosion of values in our increasingly materialistic society. When money becomes the primary measure of success, it's no surprise that other important values, compassion, empathy, integrity, start to fall by the wayside. We live in a world where people are often judged by the size of their bank accounts rather than the content of their character, where status symbols and conspicuous consumption are celebrated, while humility and generosity are often seen as weaknesses. This obsession with material wealth has created a culture of envy, greed, and entitlement. We're constantly comparing ourselves to others, coveting what they have, and feeling inadequate when we don't measure up. This shift in values has also infiltrated our institutions. Corporations prioritize profit over social responsibility. Now, let's talk about the ugly underbelly of the financial world, financial exploitation. Because while some are busy amassing fortunes, others are being preyed upon and exploited for their vulnerability. We're talking about predatory lending practices that trap people in cycles of debt. We're talking about Sweatshops where workers are paid pennies to produce cheap goods for Western consumers. These are not isolated incidents, my friends. They are systemic problems that are deeply embedded in our globalized economy. Think about payday lenders who target low-income communities with exorbitant interest rates, knowing full well that many borrowers will struggle to repay their loans. Or consider the fashion industry, where garment workers, often women and children, endure dangerous working conditions and meager wages to satisfy our insatiable appetite for fast fashion. And then there's human trafficking, a truly abhorrent crime that generates billions of dollars in profits each year. Now, let's talk about debt, shall we? Because it seems like everyone's swimming in it these days. From crippling student loan debt to insurmountable credit card balances, it's no secret that many individuals are struggling under the weight of their financial obligations. But it's not just individuals who are drowning in debt. Governments around the world are grappling with massive national debts, often fueled by reckless spending, tax cuts for the wealthy, and a misguided belief in trickle-down economics. This mountain of debt has real consequences, my friends. It limits our ability to invest in essential public services, stifles economic growth, and can even lead to financial crises. When countries are saddled with unsustainable debt burdens, they become vulnerable to exploitation by creditors, often international organizations or wealthy nations. This is about more than just numbers on a balance sheet. It's about power and control. Now let's zoom out and look at the bigger picture, the global impact of financial systems. We live in a world where capital flows freely across borders, but people often don't. A world where multinational corporations can exploit tax havens and loopholes to avoid paying their fair share, while ordinary citizens are left to foot the bill. Consider the issue of tax evasion. Trillions of dollars are stashed away in offshore accounts, hidden from tax authorities, and effectively depriving governments of much-needed revenue. This isn't just about wealthy individuals dodging taxes. It's about undermining the social contract and eroding trust in our institutions. While globalization has undoubtedly lifted millions out of poverty, it has also created opportunities for corporations to exploit cheap labor and lax environmental regulations in developing countries. Now let's talk about the role of technology in all of this. Technology can be a force for good, but it's also created new avenues for financial harm and exploitation. Surveillance capitalism collects and sells our data without consent. Cryptocurrencies can facilitate money laundering and tax evasion. Automation threatens to displace millions of workers. Every click generates data that corporations monetize. This data is used to target us with personalized ads. And finally, we arrive at the darkest corner of the financial world, the dark web and illicit markets. This hidden underbelly of the internet is where you'll find everything from stolen credit card information and counterfeit goods to drugs, weapons, and even human beings. The anonymity and lack of regulation on the dark web make it the perfect breeding ground for criminal enterprises. And while law enforcement agencies are working to crack down on these illicit marketplaces, it's a constant game of cat and mouse. As soon as one site is shut down, another one pops up in its place. The dark web is just the tip of the iceberg, a symptom of a much larger problem: the growing influence of organized crime and the increasing demand for illicit goods and services. Understanding the dark side of money is crucial for creating a more ethical, sustainable, and inclusive financial system. We've seen the devastating consequences of greed, corruption, and exploitation, but it doesn't have to be this way. We can create a world where finance serves the common good, where ethical considerations are paramount, and where the benefits of economic growth are shared more equitably. It will require a fundamental shift in our values, a commitment to transparency and accountability, and a willingness to challenge the status quo. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more insightful content.